Have you ever wondered why the pigmen are the way they are in the constant? And more importantly, how they even got here? Yeah, sure, it may just be part of an in-game mechanic without much thought. I mean, even Minecraft, one of the most popular games in the world, has literal pigmen, and although those piglins probably have their own lore, most don't raise an eyebrow to their existence. But this is something that even the game itself brings attention to in the loading screen tips. The pigmen seem to harbor a deep dislike for the constant's more monstrous denizens, attacking them on sight. Furthermore, why are pigs the only creatures in the entire game that have an immediate lycanthropic transformation from consuming monster meat? What is the true meaning of the pig heads? What are the Mants hiding? Why is Pugna a human leading the pigs in the forge? And who is Wilba's father? I'm gonna try and answer all of these, and then some. This is the Pig Theory. Wow, it's hard to believe that I made 4 of these now. Well, at the same time, it isn't too hard to believe, as theories are really fun to make, though they also take a bit of effort to figure out, but it's actually pretty surprising if you look through every instance of Don't Starve and read in between the lines, as Clay does leave pretty significant symbolism and details in these creatures, and if you spend the time looking for them, you can actually learn quite a bit about the world around them. But before we get into that, this video is brought to you by me! That's right, I sponsor myself because I am the butter sponsor.
I'm better! I am better!
No, but in all seriousness, I do have a Patreon now. If you like the content you see here and you want to support me in my endeavors while I rapidly race against the clock of YouTube before it burns its own platform to the ground, link is in the description. But with that being said, I will now get into the theory. Now, pigs, or pigmen, consist of several sentient factions of creatures pretty much everywhere in the constant. There are numerous subspecies of pigs, including the wild boars of Shipwrecked and the civilized aristocrats of Hamlet, and even the war-torn pigs of the Forge. There are many differences between these factions, but for the most part, all of their similarities harbor both a mild form of sentience, pig-like biology, and a strange xenophobia for most creatures that they consider to be monsters. Ironically enough, 2 of the default pig factions in Don't Starve can undergo a transformation that makes them monsters themselves, i.e. with a werepig transformation. Along with the fact that the majority of all your enemies in Don't Starve Forge are pigs or some sort of pig creature, and some of them are outright primal cannon fodder. And in order to get to the bottom of what exactly the pigmen are and why they are, we have to find out where the pigs first came from. Now, when we go back in time in the Constant's canon in Don't Starve, most people, including myself, first stop was probably the ancient murals. And unsurprisingly, I actually found 0 interpretations of pigs or anything that even resembled pigmen on the murals. Even for this image I found guessing the symbols written on the murals, it has no mention of pigs nor pigmen. And my first reason for not being surprised about this is simply because my personal belief is that the pigs first originated from Hamlet. How I came to that conclusion is due to the various sculptures and statues that can be found in Hamlet that all indicate that sentient pigs have been around in the constant for a very long time. The ancient statues don't look as ancient as, well, the ancients on the mainland, but the wear and tear of time is definitely still there. And with this information, we have to ask ourselves, were the pigmen before or after the fall of the ancients? Seeing as to how there's once again no mention of pigs in the murals, meaning there were no primal or sentient pigs during the time of the ancients, and there's actually a few more clues we can get before we answer. The first clue is we get from the Forge trailer. We see players opening the Fuel Weaver's gateway that leads them to the Forge. They're led to the pig faction and the Forge's leader, Pugna, who assumes they're the gatekeepers. This faction of pigs is drastically different from both Hamlet and the mainland, containing both feral versions and crossbreeds of pigs with other animals, along with the fact that they know who they are. This means the pigs must have made it through the gateway themselves. The second clue we get is due to the fact that Hamlet is in the sky. So, however the pigs got to the mainland, they likely would have been at least somewhat technological. So here's my theory. Both the ancient pigs and the ancient arthropods existed at roughly similar times. However, the pigs didn't arrive until after the fall of the ancients. The pigs had just begun making their way to the other islands in the continent, setting up in the mainland and overall setting up a vast empire for themselves. Remember, Pugna's forces in the gorge are clearly ready for war, and if Pugna is to be believed, the pigmen at one point even had the Shadow Throne, and moving underground, they were competent enough to fight their way through all the nonsense the arthropods left behind to the gateway, and actually managed to activate it. And then they arrived again. And what did they do? Well, in Pugna's own words, they severed us from the throne. So, we have a once powerful empire of pigs that at one point stretched all over the continent, including civilized pigs, boars, primal pigs, and even standard pigs that were fractured across the continent after they awoke. So, what the hell happened? And more importantly, why are the pigs in the forge being led by a human? Well, the answer to all of this isn't simple. Let's first look into what we can learn about the first pigs of Hamlet. Now, just a moment ago, I made somewhat of a leap in logic that all pigs must have originated from Hamlet just due to the ancient sculptures. These even included pigs such as boars and primitive pigs, and you might have asked how I'm so certain of this. Well, that's with the inclusion of topiaries. In the Hamlet villages in the centers, there's hedges in the shapes of both mainland pigs and the pig king, even a werepig howling that upon closer examination may just be a swamp boar, all of which Wilbur describes as royalty, even the one of a beefalo? But yes, this is evidence that mainland pigs, boars, and the Pig King were all active inhabitants of Hamlet culture. So, what else can we learn from Hamlet? Well, looking through the various trader houses, we find even more depictions of what we learned from the topiaries. Pictures of the Pig King and Queen Malfalfa, obviously, and in the hunter shot, we see stuff like taxidermy beefalo and cat-coon carcasses, signaling that both have potentially been in Hamlet before the constant. Perhaps that's why we see cat-coons spawning so close to the pig village. That, or they're just hunting trophies from trips to Hamlet and the mainland. As for the Pig King and Queen Malfalfa, we have to once again ask ourselves the question, how long have they been in charge? Seeing as how time has proven time and time again, no pun intended, to work a bit differently in the constant, it's not off the table that they are both a bit older than they're letting on. And there's also some evidence to suggest that this is true when examining one of the rare relics that the Queen will grant you a gallery key for. Wilbur's comments, "It looketh like Mama." Perhaps the relic is of Queen Malfalfa, seeing as how it's on the path to the Fountain of Youth, you know, the mythical fountain that restores you to a younger age when drank. That's actually a pretty good piece of evidence to suggest that the Queen is ridiculously old.
The Queen of England will die on September 8th.
So that solves for the other mobs, with the exception of maybe the Gorge, but what about Battlemaster Pugna, the very clear human that is in the forge and on top of it, leading the pigs? I mean, who's to say he even came to Hamlet? I mean, he could have just met the pigs and joined them as some war hero against the monsters at Constant, considering there's this strange implication for everybody to go into the ruins for no reason in specific. Charlie. And that could be true, especially considering we still need to solve for the feud with the Mants, but there's one more thing in the Hamlet in the pig villages that we need to address. Something in the background that, unless you were looking very carefully for it, I guarantee you would have missed it when playing. And something that was so confusing to me the first time I saw it that I actually got chills just from seeing it, as I didn't have an answer for it. Well, I'm gonna play the clip I took for you. Let's see if you notice. Did you see it? Let me zoom him in a bit. Why on earth is the random character's picture in the clothing shop? There is no way that is not what that picture is supposed to be. It's hard to tell because it's glued to the side of the wall, but there is no mistaking it with that question mark on their hat, along with the white-gloved hand holding their head. So, why is this here? What does this mean? Is the random character an actual person? Who is the random character? Although I can say I never really expected the random character as an actual character, I can't say the thought that's never really crossed my mind either. Well, I think the most logical conclusion is that it's symbolic that a human, or at least a survivor-esque person, was in Hamlet before one of the survivors we know first came to Hamlet. And we know that there are other survivors in the continent because the ones on the roster, because everywhere we go, we can find skeletons of sorts. So who is this roguelike hero that was popular enough to be framed in a photo or a painting by the pigs of Hamlet? I think we can safely rule out Maxwell, as he doesn't even greet you in Hamlet. There would be no reason to hold any form of mystery when it comes to Wilbur, and Wormwood's a bit of a loner anyways, and has no higher status with pigfolk. Well, I think the most obvious answer is that it is Pugna, and it would certainly make sense, especially considering he's leading an entire faction of pigs. The only other fit for this pre-Wilson veteran survivor of the Constant is the curio trader, and as of writing this, it's very possibly well could be him, since he's also the judge in the year of the beefalo, and because of that, we know that pigmen also practice beefalo husbandry, but I'm more inclined to believe that it is Pugna. But even then, there's a problem with this theory, and that is that Pugna doesn't look like the random character model at all. As a matter of fact, the skin looks more like the curio collector, if anything. And my response to that is because this is not how Pugna is now, but how the pugs remember him, before they severed the pig empire from the throne. Upcoming spoiler for my monster meat theory. If you want to go and watch that before I continue, go ahead, but it's not required to understand the context of this claim. So in my monster meat theory, I came to the conclusion that a majority of all creatures in Don't Starve that drop monster meat are actually mutants that have had certain mutations occur due to being around and consuming nightmare fuel or monster meat. These mutations include excessive size increase, excessive hair growth, lycanthropic mutation, and other primitive growths. Think about it. Right next to Pugna on his throne in the Forge is both a football helmet and an elite-looking handbat. Along with the fact that Pugna's name literally means warrior, Pugna clearly at some point in time was a fighter himself and not just a spectator. Ironically enough, they could have even named the Pugalisk after Pugna, as he could have been the first person to defeat it. So, what happened? I mean, surely I can make the argument that when they attacked, they could have just twisted his form to be similar to a pig king, but now, despite being morbidly obese, he has no real mutations about him. Even in the trailer, you can see inside his mouth, and his teeth aren't even sharp. And unfortunately, this once again left me in an impasse. Because although the creatures of the Gorge could very well be more mutants, despite me comparing them to their primitive monster forms in the monster meat theory, I can't confirm that this is factual, seeing as how we know there are non-mutant animal hybrids already in the Constant. This could actually be proved as false if we take and run with the idea that the Borella also came from the Constant, seeing as how it and the spider monkey are, well, need I say more? The Borella was a native to Hamlet that the pigs selectively bred for combat, and over time their leftover descendants may have taken some form of monster corruption. Well, my next stop was the Curio cabinets to see if one of the comments would lead me to a more concrete answer, and what I found really wasn't all too helpful at first. The only things I found were just more evidence to support my opening theory that all pigs originated from Hamlet. However, I also examined the profile icons for the audience and noticed the distinction with the wording. Boars. Not pigs, boars. Of course, they have the underbit outstretched teeth that kind of look like the start of tusks, but that's when I noticed there was something here, and that is the main difference between boars and pigs. Pigs are generally considered the domestic version of the genus Sus, Among Us, while boars, having the ability to both also be considered just male versions of pigs, are usually considered the wild version. But what a lot of people don't know is that a pig can very easily become boar-like if the conditions are right. A domesticated pig being introduced to the wild can very quickly bring about morphological changes, including the thickening of hair, the growing of tusks, and the increase in aggression. And that would certainly make sense coming from a place like the Forge. Pugna himself even says this, forged by fire and steel, hardship has only made us stronger. But why were the pigs/boars ready for war to begin with? And yeah, sure, being the leading factional power in an area also usually commands a pretty heavy military force. However, that wouldn't make sense for the appraisal of Pugna as a war hero, for him to just join the pigs during a time of peace. I mean, yeah, sure, the apocalypse is a thing, but there's actually something to suggest that the pigs had already had a round of conflict with the arthropods before, with the only other dominant faction in the Hamlet. Let's talk about the Mant War. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I originally struggled with coming to a conclusion about the Mants and their importance in Don't Starve lore due to a single reason, and that was that unless ordered to by the player when befriended, regular Mants and pigs will never fight each other, and originally thought this was a bug, no pun intended, especially considering Wilba has nothing but vitriol for the Mants. Queen Warmant obtained her mother's crown, likely by thievery, and it's not just the royal family feud, but random pig heads are outside of the Mant hives. But I can now successfully conclude whether this is intentional or not is now almost unnecessary to know. And that's because we have enough evidence to conclude two things. One, that there was a war, and two, that there will be another war. Now, here are some things we already know. There are ancient ruins of both Mants and pigs in Hamlet, meaning both of these races have ancient roots. And if the Apocalypse calendar is to be taken as a reference to ancient Mayan calendar that was stated in 2012 would bring about the end of the world, we can assume that, at the very least, whoever built the calendar was made in reference to Mayan culture. And the Mayans during their reign were consistently warlike, and not only warlike, but often brutal in their ways, capturing people for human sacrifice like the Aztecs did. Now, out of these two races, the one who gives us the most insight is once again Wagstaff, and ironically enough, Wagstaff openly states in regards to several of the pigs, specifically the older ones, that they are reluctant to answer his questions. Even Wilba notices this too, meaning it's not just Wagstaff being nosy. And as for the Mants, well, Wagstaff outright gives us the answer. A war-based society consisting of hexapod humanoid invertebrates. And it would honestly make sense for the Apocalypse calendar to kind of be built by the Mants, because, as a matter of fact, it even makes the Mants stronger. When the apocalypse occurs, Mants become Mant warriors decorated with war paint. Now, I don't think the pigs are innocent either, especially considering it looks more like pig architecture, but this is very clearly one race trading a pro for another race trading a, well, con. Okay, so there's some evidence to suggest there was a pig and Mant conflict in the past. So what makes me so certain there is going to be future conflict? Well, it actually comes from a Don't Starve mod made almost 10 years ago by Clay themselves. The mod is known as the Screecher. In it, you play as a camper alone in the night, making his way to a helipad. On the way, you encounter this creature known as a Screecher, an owl-humanoid hybrid that violently rips the face off of anything that stares at it for too long. And eventually, you make it to the end, where you meet a rather scary demise. So, what on earth does this have to do with Mants? Well, I'm gonna play two clips for you. Let me see if you notice some key similarities. Now, I'm not saying that Mants are actually Screechers. As a matter of fact, I don't even think the Screecher and Don't Starve are even in the same universe currently. But there's some pretty clear symbolism here. And given the design similarities of a Screecher and a Thunderbird, it's safe to assume Clay at least had some intention here. What kind of symbolism? Well, there are Mant suits in the game that allow you to move through Mant hives undisturbed by regular Mants, though the guards will see right through your disguise and attack you instantly. In insect colonies, the way insects tell each other as friend or foe is with pheromones their bodies give off of, which, as stated by Wagstaff, the suit provides. This may become disturbing to the Mants when they find someone wearing a Mant mask, almost like in the Mant warrior's eyes that they see someone wearing the face of someone else and responding by, I don't know, pulling their faces off, pulling their entire heads off, and then sticking them on a stick afterwards as an example to any other pig spy trying to get their queen's crown back. And how do we know war is coming between the two factions? Well, going back to the trailer video, we see a horde of Mant warriors on the surface, ready for war. They're just waiting for the right time to strike. So, what made this xenophobic conflict between the pigs and the Mants? Well, as stated above, the pigs seem to be hiding some important part of pig history to Wagstaff. But what? Well, my first thought was it had something to do with the Apocalypse calendar, as not only does it benefit the Mants, but it appears to be similar to ancient pig architecture. And then I remembered, maybe there's a reason pigs are reluctant to answer the questions of Wagstaff, even the questions of Wilba. Maybe there's something they are hiding that's very important about Hamlet's past. Something about Wilba's past. Perhaps this is where Wilba's father comes in. So I think it's time to ask, who is Wilba's father? She shows no familiarity with the Pig King, so he's likely out, plus the fact that if Wilba inherited her father's curse, it literally can't be him, as Pig King doesn't even wear pig during full moons. Pugna could possibly fit, but this would imply that Pugna is part werepig when he isn't even a pig himself. Also, it implies that he copulated with a pig woman. None of the traders in the village or the guards suffer from lycanthropy, so it isn't them. This really only leaves the elder pig, which, if you've seen my Mern theory and this guy's relation to it, is honestly pretty heartbreaking. What if I told you it was none of these men? At least, not in the way you think. What if I told you Wilba's father might actually be a demon? Now, hold on, what on earth do I mean by this? There aren't even any demons in the Constant, besides Krampus, and Claus, and hell, even Wartox. Alright, we've now established that demons are possible in the Constant. Okay, but none of those characters even have anything to do with pigs. Well, to understand what I'm now going to refer to as demon theory, is to first acknowledge the symbolism in Don't Starve to a book and movie known as Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies was a book written in 1954 by William Golding. It tells of a story about a group of boys who get stranded on an island. When, with all the adults dead, they are left to fend for themselves. At first things go well, the boys fend for themselves well, gathering food, but eventually arguing, blaming, and conflict causes one group of kids to splinter out into another faction, quickly turning to thievery, aggression, violence, and eventually murder. So, what does all this have to do with Don't Starve's pigmen, and how does it relate to Wilba's father? Well, there's a few specific scenes that stick out in the book and the movie. One of the most important ones is the boys believe a beast to be hiding out in a cave, so they bring in an offering in the form of a pig's head on a stick. It's not until one of the kids, Simon, is alone with the pig's head that it begins speaking to him. It claims that the head himself is the real beast and proclaims itself to be the Lord of the Flies. And lastly, that Simon will never be able to escape him as he lies within all human beings. This is proven as true very quickly as Simon returns to the second faction of boys to warn them that there is no real beast, only for the kids to think he is the beast and slay him instead. Wilson and Wendy, when examining the pig head in Don't Starve, make direct references to the Lord of the Flies with their two comments. Looks like an offering to the beast. Kill the pig, spill his blood. So, how does this correlate to demonology? Well, the name Lord of the Flies isn't just the title of the book, but it is also the title of Beelzebub, the demon of gluttony. And before you ask, maybe it's just the characters being wacky. I mean, they're on an island and a lot of crazy stuff happens on this island. Well, waiting for a full moon dissuades that when the pig head's eyes create an ominous glow and their mouths open wide. Wagstaff even comments on it, it appears to be a conduit for dark forces. And dark forces certainly manifest in all pigs during a full moon, not even requiring monster meat or nightmare fuel to revert to their primal lycanthropic beast forms. And pigs, especially pig guards, have no problem attacking each other and tearing anything they think to be a beast or monster to pieces, even if it's not. And how does this link back to Wilba's father? We don't know what he looks like or what he acts like, but we do know that he gave his daughter a silver necklace that, when preventing Wilba from turning into a werepig, drains her sanity at -6.66, the sign of the beast. And one last piece of evidence is Beelzebub's sin gluttony's animal representation is that of a pig or a boar. Now, whether Wilba's father is actually the demon Beelzebub or not is completely up for grabs, as, after all, the necklace he gave her is meant to prevent her transformation, not harm her. If anything, this could be seen as kind of a caring act of a father who knew very well about her demonic roots, and only took the proper steps in doing the best he could to make sure that she's safe. This would all correlate with the pig elder who, as I've stated multiple times in the past, is a kind-hearted man. Whether her father is the elder pig, a literal demon, or another pig that I'm somehow missing, I'm not entirely certain. But we aren't exactly done with the demons part of this theory, however. We still don't know what exactly the pigs were hiding, or what exactly went down during the conflict of the Mants and the pigs. We really just have to assume the conflict was between— Okay, wait a minute, where did the Iron Hulk come from? Now, I stated earlier that there was conflict for the Mants and the pigs in their early ancient history, and the implication was that they fought amongst themselves. But what if there was a third faction? I mean, after all, pig architecture also had the depictions of the Mants, and even a stone made specifically for translating English to Mant speech patterns. But how did the Iron Hulk get there? I mean, yeah, clearly pigs have current scientific pursuits in regards to the magic of the constant, but this technology is far too advanced even for the most civilized of Hamlet, along with the fact that it is regarded as ancient technology. It goes even further than that. The clay devs themselves, during Rhymes with Clay, even directly state the builders of the Iron Hulk are a secret, meaning it's likely not somebody that we're expecting. So, who has access to iron and electricity? Well, I have a theory. You remember the Thunderbirds from earlier? Have you ever wondered why the only thing at their nests are literal iron, and how their only attack is the ability to call down lightning at 3 random locations that often awake parts of the Iron Hulk? I mean, there are various mobs, events, and objects in Don't Starve that all attract lightning to it, but the Thunderbird is seemingly the only mob in the entirety of Don't Starve that actively conjures lightning, seemingly out of nothing. That's a little strange even for Don't Starve, along with the fact that they are nesting literal iron. And although they aren't growing more iron, as iron never respawns, they at the very least are collecting and hoarding it. Now, I don't think Thunderbirds themselves are responsible for creating the Hulks, but potentially one of their ancestors or another race that was utilizing their affinity for iron and electricity could have. Well, what's another mob that might have some kind of vendetta against the pigs? Well, believe it or not, the BFB clearly has no problem terrorizing pigs. Every time it lands near pig structures, it will usually destroy several pig houses in the area before abducting the player. Why a war was fought and why a technology and strength superiority race would have even bothered with Hamlet, much less fighting pigs, is still beyond me, possibly part of the demonology theory. If I'm being honest, the only other faction that can fit the technology bill who isn't a human inventor like Wagstaff is them. But hey, even the architecture of the structures found in BFB's nest look vaguely similar to that of the swamp pig houses in the gorge. Maybe at one point they even tried to work together, but I have one more piece of evidence that there at the very least was some kind of conflict between pigs and the birds. Robin is the Hamlet equivalent of Chester, and the player gets him by hatching the stone egg found in BFB's island, and it's believed to be the BFB's child. What's important about this is Wilba's quote for him: "Robin shall restore amends." A quote from a Shakespearean play at the very end of Midsummer Night's Dream, as the very last line spoken, which essentially mean, "We will make it up to you in return for your applause." And I think from this, we can conclude one of two things. One, that I'm completely wrong about there being a race of sentient birds, even though there were pig structures on BFB's island, and the fight that really went down was between the pigs and Mants versus them. Or that the pigs did something really bad in regards of the apocalypse, and they're aware of it. That's why they're hiding it, and that's why the BFB is still mad, because they haven't quite forgave the pigs yet. And seeing as how the Mants are all set up in places the BFB can't even get to, I don't even want to know what their opinion on the Mants is. Wilba may not know what the pigs did, but she knows that she needs to help atone for it to the BFB. And in that regard, it seems as though the pigs, at least in Hamlet, thanks to the birds, are as of now free of demons. I can't say the same about the pigs of the Constant, and despite pigmen's xenophobia because of this, the Mants and other friendly bugs seem to be safe too, as there's no other reference of the Lord of the Flies anywhere else in Don't Starve. Okay, wait a minute. Why is there a boss called Lord of the Fruit Flies? Okay, let's do it. I'm about to explain why the Lord of the Fruit Flies is actually on the side of the Mants and why that's significant. First, obvious question is they are both clearly two completely different animals. Secondly, the Mants are in Hamlet and the Lord of the Flies is in the mainland. I have an answer for both of these things. The first thing, and many people have called this out before me, but Queen Wahman actually isn't even a mant at all, or at least not the same species. Her body resembles more that of a termite, a completely separate animal from ants, though it's not unheard of for ants to also have developed an enlarged posterior, specifically the queen's. She is more likely an ant-termite hybrid of sorts. The majority of all the Mants in the hive don't even spawn from her. They spawn from their own ant combs. And the argument for how she raises her own warrior Mants and how she has a pheromone that tricks the regular worker Mants, well, both of these can actually be explained with the phenomena that ants do in the real world. One species of ant, known as a social parasite ant, has its queen actually infiltrate the colony of a completely different ant colony that is sometimes even a different species of ants, killing the original queen and drinking her blood so that she has the same pheromone as the rest of the colony, and then she continues laying eggs as though she was the original queen. And there's another species of ants that outright ransack other ant colonies specifically to kidnap larvae and eggs of that colony in order to use them as slaves to their own colony. Seem a little bit more believable now? Okay, but what about how Wombat and Lord Fruitfly are completely different insects? And my response to that is to take a closer look. They both have the same color scheme, they both have small wings, and they both even have similar arm types that end in claws. It doesn't even end with looking slightly similar. In termite colonies, termites are actually one of the few colonizing insect species to have both a queen and a king, and the king continues to mate with the queen throughout her life, and the fact that the king is often significantly smaller than the queen. Dude, I swear this is not a coincidence, it has to be intentional. And the last, and arguably the most important piece of evidence, is when you kill the Lord of the Fruit Flies, it drops a fruit fly fruit. Most all characters remark on how the fruit is what controls the fruit flies, not the Lord of the Fruit Flies himself. It's significant as it shows how both Queen Wombat and the Lord of the Fruit Flies are not even the lords or queens of their own insect colonies. They're simply controlling others. How Queen Wombat is slowly corrupting the Mants, even turning them into ferocious warriors of her own creation as she prepares to attack the Pigs, and how the Lord of the Fruit Flies slowly corrupts the fauna, turning it into weeds and decay. But even with all of this, what does this all mean?
There were some things he wanted to say to his fellow animals before it might be too late.
Now, throughout this entire theory, I've uncovered a lot of stuff, made a lot of assumptions, and even changed my story as I progressed deeper into the story, like when I asked who the random character was. This is due to the fact that, no matter what, I cannot give a solid answer on what happened during the long forgotten war, as Clay calls it, or who this mysterious character is. And because of it, admittedly, this is the most self-world building I've had to do during a theory. But this is my best guess at what happened in the history of the pigmen. I'm probably wrong about some of this, but here we go. So what I've established is that all pigs originated from Hamlet, spawning into sentience around the same time as the ancient arthropodals' extinction in the mainland and the Mant people. During this time, the pigs and Mants were faced by another faction of birds. Originally, the pigs, Mants, and birds all prospered in Hamlet, then a mysterious figure arrived. The opinions on this individual were mixed, to say the least. The figure showed them various magic items and also likely introduced them to the nightmare fuel. Originally, the civilizations and the young Queen Malfalfa accepted these new gifts and prospered, but as time went on and more esoteric items were added, other parties began to grow skeptical. The first of these groups were the birds, who were undoubtedly the smartest. Eventually, the mysterious figure proposed the building of a calendar, something that would supposedly help them control day and night. This is where the birds stepped in to oppose the pigs and the Mants. Other pig factions were also growing skeptical, but still supported them until the calendar's creation. By then, the birds had declared war on the pigs in an effort to stop them, though the pigs had already finished the calendar, and when it was activated for the first time, the apocalypse moon had already done its damage, mutating pigs caught in the moonlight into horrific monsters. This had its effect on the Mants too, turning them into violent, bloodthirsty warriors, and having a new monarch appear among the Mants proclaiming to be the queen. Fortunately, at this time, the birds were able to stop it, but not without significant cost to their own forces, and not permanently. The damage was already done to the pigs, who now, a significant portion of the population, faced the threat of lycanthropy for good. Queen Malfalfa, due to her involvement with the stranger, likely realized what had happened and then banished him. This enraged the Mants, who were now fully under the control of another one of the stranger's pawns, Queen Wombat, who slowly began plotting against her. During this time, a human comes to the continent by the name of Pugna. Making his way to Hamlet, Pugna quickly proves himself to be an invaluable warrior, slaying the Puglisk in Queen Malfalfa's honor. Because of this, the queen is able to stay consistently young. Pugna, after hearing what happened with the stranger, reveals that there is a portal on the mainland that could potentially lead them to the stranger's domain. Wanting revenge, Pugna trains and leads an army of pigs into the continent, where they fight their way through the ancient portal and make it to the Shadow Throne. Then they arrive and sever the pigs' army, locking them in the forge. The pigs that were fortunate enough to not be caught in Pugna's army's massacre continue ruling over their newly discovered lands independently. The third faction of swamp pigs, led by the Elder Pig, also leaves and finds an island of goat people known as the Gorge, where the Elder Pig learns that lycanthropy can actually be prevented by silver items, which causes him and his followers to become more amicable and friendly, despite still being cursed by the stranger's moon. Elder Pig wants to return to the other pigs to show him his silver and has a necklace made to show what it can do, but can't leave because the gnaw starts mutating the population. Queen Malfalfa hadn't realized it at the time, but she had conceived a child with the stranger. She named her daughter Wilba, Princess of the Pig Kingdom. Shortly after, she learned her daughter had the same curse her father played onto Hamlet. The BFB sees this, who searches the Constance Islands easy. Finding the Gorge, the Elder Pig gives it the necklace to where it flies off, though since it's so big, it ends up taking some of the pig houses with it, which is why the gnaw is mad at the pigs. Arriving at Hamlet, Wilba receives the necklace, believing it to be a gift from her father. And lastly, we have the Lord of the Fruit Flies, spawned from the same storm that created Queen Womant. It too preys upon a population of insects, controlling them to his will, though they can easily be freed if he is slain. That's why the pigs of Hamlet won't reveal the past, because they're ashamed. And it really is, as Clay stated, a long-forgotten war. The final piece that displays the apocalypse as the work of a demon, and not them, is the Ancient Herald, someone who was around during the ancient times, believed to be a member of the ancient Arthropodals. The only place he could ever manifest is during the apocalypse, and for the longest time, I didn't have an answer on him. But then I remembered the moon during the apocalypse, the glowing red color. The apocalypse is sort of a solar eclipse, a time where the moon completely envelopes the sun, but leaves the world around it dark. The only time they wouldn't be around to watch him, and simply he chose the work of a demon compared to them. Unfortunately, siding with a demon isn't exactly preferable. And although they aren't entirely alike, the pigmen of the mainland are similar, as they still share the aspects of the demon that twisted their form, turned from them aggressive, turned them into gluttons, though initially xenophobic and rude, feed into their gluttony and they become friendly. The pigmen in the mainland truly do symbolize the boys from the Lord of the Flies, as the beast lies inside all of them, but they aren't evil, just pigs cursed by something. And for once, it's not them, it's the demon of gluttony, Beelzebub, Wilba's father, often represented by a pig or a boar, and that is the pig theory.
The pigs had taken up the best positions immediately in front of the platform. Among them, Snowball, determined.
And that is the pig theory. A story of an originally prospering land of 3 different races erupting into war and vitriol due to meddling from external forces. It's almost kind of ironic that this story has not only been told once before with the ancient Arthropodals and them, twice with the goat people in the Gorge with the gnaw, and now a third time with the pigmen and a demon. It is pretty sad though, knowing that the pigs only fall into their aggressive nature and hatred of what they perceive as monsters is because of something they can't control. Though there's always some contrast with my theories and exactly what went down, I would argue that this theory so far is my most muddy, and that's due to the fact that there's simply too much to speculate about. The mysterious stranger could also have been the secret builder of the mechs, or he might not even exist. The 10-piece oinks, although they could be explained as being made out of grey gold, could very well just be silver. Lastly, although there are demons, there's no solid evidence to 100% confirm Beelzebub's existence in the Constant besides the Lord of the Flies. But I do still think this is a good theory. There are a lot of very clear connections, and if I am correct, this would certainly be following the trend of Other Worlds and Don't Starve. And because of that, I think my theory, although fairly muddy at the end, is a good general idea of what went down. At the end of the day, we won't know the questions of, will we ever cure the pigs, where Wilba is now, and if we will ever meet her father. But from what it looks like, we still have a bit of the world of Don't Starve yet to discover, and whether or not the pigs in the end will be friends or foes. Wait, but pigs! How are we gonna split all of this Among Us!